Good evening, folks. Arak StarrEagle here at Douglas College. It's been a long day of filming. And today is the anniversary of the assassination of a great man, a wonderful man, the late President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And I know my friend Charlie, my compadre Charlie, Mr. Gnosis over there, he's spoken a few quotes in honor of John F. Kennedy. What I'm going to be doing is, I don't have all the facts and figures like my esteemed colleague does, but what I do have is passion. Not that other people lack that, of course, either. But John F. Kennedy spoke to our hearts, and he was the second president. I really feel that there have been others prior, perhaps, Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm sure there were others, but before John F. Kennedy, there was Franklin Delano Roosevelt that spoke to us and harnessed the raw power of emotion, and it wasn't a negative side of emotion. He said the only thing to fear is fear itself. That was wise. And, like I said, it spoke to our hearts. It spoke to our souls. John F. Kennedy asked us to be more than what we were. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Service, sacrifice, compassion. And, really before that, we didn't have presidents, and actually even since, in this modern era, I mean, after 9/11, George W. Bush, his answer was, shock. I remember that, it was inexplicable. But John F. Kennedy, in a time of great crisis, when there was revolutions on the streets, they were under the threat, the looming shadow of communism, the right in the fiery midst of the Cold War. And that was actually an odd juxtaposition there of two opposite things. But strangely enough, but right in the midst of the Cold War, everyone's worried about the nuclear bomb dropping on them, and people were building bunkers at that time, and there's unrest in regards to civil rights. Women still didn't have the rights that they did, and let alone gay people coming out of the closet, black people, African Americans, striving to gain more rights, civil rights, and the Klan was very active at that time, and you had Martin Luther King with the Freedom Riders, and Malcolm X, and the Black Panthers came a little bit later on. But John F. Kennedy was the first president that really, he didn't necessarily use the phrase hope and change like Barack Obama did, and that was some 58 years later, but he was the one that really introduced hope into the political arena, into the common discourse in the political arena. He was the one that really aimed he aimed the arrows basically at hope, giving people hope, and I think we have him to thank for that. He's the one that strove to put the first men on the moon, and putting people on the moon, and the silver moon out in space there, that gave people hope. And he had nerve, he had willpower, he had courage. The Cuban Missile Crisis, everyone just biting their fingernails thinking there's going to be nuclear war. The Russians involved and Castro involved, and there's a lot of incendiary elements. I mean, under a lesser president, under a lesser man, he may have started, punching that code and launched the nuclear bombs, and kablooey. I mean, basically 11th hour stuff, basically. He used peace and diplomacy and tact and negotiation, and he was a good man for that. Like I say, under a lesser president, under a lesser leader, I mean, we wouldn't be here talking right now. We wouldn't have the internet. We wouldn't, everything would be irradiated, and we'd have fallout and sickness, and we'd have wasteland, under a lesser president, under a lesser man. And he had tremendous nerve and tremendous courage and tremendous willpower. Again, I think maybe Charlie has mentioned this as well, Mr. Gnosis, in regards to Vietnam. Certainly the U.S. was embroiled in that war, and I suppose Mr. Kennedy was as well, but again, I'm not perfect with facts and figures, but he pulled as many as 1,000 troops out, and that's saying something. And, Eisenhower spoke before he did about the looming dangers of the military-industrial complex, but I think it was really John F. Kennedy that duked it out, that went mano a mano against the mighty, all-powerful military-industrial complex. There's those that believe that it was the mob that took him out. That's another thing too. Now, it wasn't necessarily John F. Kennedy that was responsible for this, but if you've seen documentaries on Kennedy, you know that Joe Kennedy actually was a rather crooked man. And he loved his sons very much, but he expected a lot out of them, and as a matter of course, he sometimes was ruthless and ambitious and self-serving and dishonest in his ways of achieving power for himself and his family. He dealt with the mob. And in John F. Kennedy, I don't know about Robert F. Kennedy, but in John F. Kennedy's first congressional race, when he was just getting into Congress, they accepted mob money. It was dirty politics, but both Kennedy brothers, they actually took a stand against the mob too. So not just against, I might add, the military-industrial complex, they took a stand against the mob, organized crime. And Bobby Kennedy, as Attorney General, was one of the ones, I'll say a few words about him too, that really took on them. And I believe it was the mob that killed him. But as far as John F. Kennedy himself, not Herbert Hoover, excuse me, J. Edgar Hoover, a strange fellow. I could fill up a lot of airtime on how strange this man was, but a very insidious man too, a very nefarious man, and just spider webs of manipulations, this man, world over. I mean, we talk about the surveillance age right now under the Obama administration. I think a lot of that we owe to J. Edgar Hoover. He was in charge of the CIA and everything back then. And he investigated Kennedy. He didn't like the man personally, and John F. Kennedy didn't support what Hoover was doing, from my understanding as well. And there's affairs and everything. I mean, we can't judge Kennedy in his personal life, but that's him, between him and God, frankly. And and even if you don't believe in God, that personal matters should just stay personal. I believe that. If you look at Bill Clinton too, a lot of people feel he's a great president. He couldn't keep it. Anyway, enough about that. But yeah, he basically got the CIA quite upset with him, and they felt that he's meddling in their affairs and didn't support, their goals and that sort of thing. So certainly they could have been involved in that. There's lots of conspiracies, and the top generals, as Mr. Gnosis has said, that pulling troops out of Vietnam, and they want to go full bore into there. And a man that I actually admired, Lyndon Baines Johnson, with the Great Society, I admired him, and also basically knowing that he would lose Texas and the South, all of the South, for a generation, to the Republicans. He signed that Civil Rights Bill. But John F. Kennedy actually put the wheels in motion. He was the one, the first president that really took any kind of action whatsoever on civil rights for African Americans. Lyndon Baines Johnson picked up that ball and ran with it all the way into the end zone, if you will, and scored the touchdown. But John F. Kennedy was the first man that put that ball into motion and started running with the ball. And we don't know, I mean, he died, he was assassinated. We don't know, again, we don't know whether it was the mob. Some people said Castro, the Russians, Lyndon Johnson being jealous of him. That's hearsay. There's the whole magic bullet theory and all that sort of thing. But, Kennedy, like I say, is responsible for a lot of things that give us hope and fomented peace, which is always good. And that was the great age of, I loved it, and the headband should say a lot, the great age of the hippie movements. And I'm all about supporting peace. I really don't think that, I'll say just something about that. I think that war is the last resort. It shouldn't even be a resort. I mean, all life is precious and all life is sacred. And certainly John F. Kennedy was no wimp. He did take a stand when he needed to take a stand. And again, like I say, as demonstrated in the Bay of Pigs, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, very tense situations, especially in the Cuban Missile Crisis, he showed the courage of a lion, and the willpower of a bull, so to speak. He showed nerve and exercised, again, the tact and the diplomacy and negotiation, and push the agenda of peace forward, and the world, like I said, we wouldn't even be around if it wasn't for Khrushchev and Kennedy. And Khrushchev, we can't forget that too, Khrushchev and Kennedy, having talks, and in the 11th hour, being able to see eye to eye. And we owe a lot to him, we, like I said, under a lesser president, and putting the first few men in space, that's a tremendous touchdown for the world, not just for America. I want to use that term again, touchdown. He put that one in the end zone too, folks, and space exploration, and we should be doing more of that. And he gave us the ability to dare to dream, dream the impossible dream and achieve that impossible dream and make it a reality. We need more presidents like that. We need more presidents like that. So, I mean, like I say, there's the gentleman in office now that talks about hope and change, but I think that had Kennedy lived, I think he's the one that really, we would have saw a lot of, it wouldn't have just been hope, it really would have been change under this man. I honestly, he had his flaws, his personal flaws, but he had a lot of great things about him. You know, my personal favorite was Lyndon Johnson's side from Vietnam because I believed in the Great Society, education, and efforts for the poor. But John F. Kennedy believed in these things too, and I think that given time, he would have the final, or what did they call it, the New Frontier, very similar to the Great Society, and he cared about giving people medicine and education, and I don't know where he stood on the environment, but he cared for the poor and the sick as well, and the least of us in society. But bottom line, he was just a great man, and I think the world was better off for having known this man. John F. Kennedy, I salute your spirit out there in the ether, and I just want to say, let's give honor and praise to a great man here, because the world was better off for having known him, and he set the course, in a positive way for future presidents. And I kind of wish more that that was a great age of Titan presidents. From all the way from FDR, excluding Truman, in my opinion, the whole Hiroshima Nagasaki thing, that was cowardly. But you had your Roosevelt, and you had even Nixon. I could fill up some airtime another day on Nixon. You had Johnson, Ford, Kennedy, and Carter, a great peacemonger, a great ex-president too, I might add. I'd like to speak on him at a later date. But John F. Kennedy certainly set the mold, and he was more than just image. He like I say, he really gave us the ability to dare to dream the impossible dream, and achieve that dream, and service and sacrifice and compassion. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. These words, they ring like a bell throughout eternity, and they're words to live by. Because I think that, a lot of times leaders will descend with this. A lot of times leaders, they promise, and they promise more than they can give. They're only human. And of course, Kennedy was only human too, and he knew that. He knew that. He knew he had virtues, he knew he had sins, he knew he had flaws, he knew he had great things inside of him. And I think any good leader also asks their followers, inspires their followers. They lead by influence, they lead by example, but they can't promise more than what they can give. But, what they can promise is that if everyone stands, it's a call to arms, folks. If everyone stands together united, we can achieve that peace, we can achieve that harmony, we can achieve that equality, and we can achieve that freedom. And he asks for us to be not just better than what we are, but to be who we truly are. And that's children of the light. And we all yearn for peace, and we do yearn for that harmony, for that love, that equality, and that freedom, and that compassion. And there certainly was a glow inside that man. John F. Kennedy, I salute you.